I just want to show you what's inside a cell, all of the different things and processes that go on inside a cell. This first video is basically just labeling to show you the things that are in the cell. But as we go through the series, I will highlight each individual organelle and its process and the things that it does to help us understand biology and help us with energy and help us with all the immune and hormone things that go on in our system. So although this video may be a little bit off track from nutrition and lifestyle, it's more of an informative video to inform you what the cell, human cell is, what it looks like, and then when we go further down the track into all energy systems, into how things go in and out of the cell, how the cell reacts to hormones and all kind of things like that, then you know which parts of the cell we're talking about and which parts it relates to. So I hope you enjoy this video. Stay tuned to the end when I'll summarize it even more and I'll try and show you, try and point out why nutrition and lifestyle is important to the cell.
So let's look at cells. This particular cell, a eukaryotic cell, which is human body cell. Most of our body is made up of these. There are 100 trillion cells, up to 100 trillion cells of these things going around in our body in all different kinds of forms. Different kind of forms like this down here, all the different types. We've got the muscle type, endothelial type, neurons, hepatocytes found in the liver, blood. They're all different kinds of cells, all function differently, all look differently. The size and the function are all different in these cells, but they all have a very similar structure, which is this structure here. So let's talk through it. What is the cell? What's it made up of? And how does it work within our body? Okay, so lots of people talk about the mitochondria of the cell, how it's the powerhouse of the cell, which it is, which are these things here and over here that you can see, the mitochondria. Okay, we'll talk more about the mitochondria when we get on about energy. But really, I just want to show you how the whole cell works first. So it has this round membrane round the outside of it. Not necessarily round, but easy to draw it round. This membrane is a phospholipid bilayer. So 2 layers of phospholipids. Phospholipids are fats made up of proteins, fats, cholesterol, all kind of things. Might actually do a separate video on the phospholipid bilayer membrane because it's quite important to know how things get in and out of the cell. But as you can see, inside the cell, we have this bound area here, which is the nucleus. This is where the eukaryotic cell gets its name from. A eukaryote means that it has an area within it which has the bound DNA and RNA and chromosomes, things like that, as that bound area. A prokaryote is the other type of cell which doesn't have a bound area, like a bound nucleus or any sort of DNA bound within it. The eukaryote does. So what's inside our cells? Okay, you can see there's all different kind of things going on in the cell here. It's like a city. It's got all kinds of different things. These different things inside the cell are called organelles. All these organelles do different kind of things. Each organelle also has its own membrane, so its own fat covered membrane within it, which is also important for later on when we talk about cholesterol and things like that. But you can see here at the top of the nucleus, this thing here is called the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Rough because it helps proteins transfer from inside the nucleus to outside, like things called ribosomes. We have the smooth endoplasmic reticulum here. Ions as well, they're important within the cell and outside the cell. I'll talk a bit about that. I want to talk about the phospholipid bilayer, how ions get in and out of the cell. We also have structural and functional proteins, things called microtubules, just here like this. And there's all kind of different things. The whole, as it is inside the cell, the whole thing, the actual whole thing inside the cell, including all the organelles, is called the cytoplasm. So when we talk about the cytoplasm, that's what we mean. Everything inside the cell, not the bound nucleus, but everything else inside the cell. There's also another thing called the Golgi apparatus there that helps with proteins and other things within the cell, but we'll talk more about that as we go. The main thing to realize is the actual cell itself is made up of 70 to 85% water. So that's important to know. We've got the fat on the outside, the phospholipid bilayer, which is the fat, which helps things go in and out of the cell. But mostly when things are inside the cell, they are encased in water. The semi-permeable membrane of a phospholipid bilayer helps things transfer in and out, but we'll talk about that later. The other thing that makes up most of the cell is proteins. Proteins are like 10 to 20%, which makes up every single cell you have. Remember, you have 100 trillion cells. So you need to make sure that you have plenty of protein, because protein makes up most of these cells. 10 to 20% of each cell is protein. So if you're protein deficient, then your cells are going to suffer. Okay, so some of them cells are structural, some are functional. They offer framework and scaffolding to the cells, so they help them to stay in the form that they are. We also have ions. Ions are present inside a cell and outside of the cell. These ions transfer from in to out using concentration gradients and sodium pumps. We'll talk about those. The proteins that are found inside the phospholipid bilayer help ions go in and out of the cell. Things like sodium, magnesium, potassium, those sort of important electrolytes that we all know that we need. They are present inside the cell. They also need to be, some of them like sodium, more present outside the cell, and we need to be able to transfer them in and out as we need them. They're important things to note that are in every cell. The other things found in cells are lipids, phospholipids, cholesterol, triglycerides, all found inside the membrane. They help to move fluids around. The triglycerides help for energy transfer. When we get onto the mitochondria, I'll talk more about triglycerides. And then other things found in most cells, especially muscle cells, carbs, glucose. The glucose is found inside the cell. And inside the cell, what the glucose does is it does a process called glycolysis before it even gets to the mitochondria itself. So this is a basic overview of a cell, a eukaryotic cell. We know that most of it's made of water. We know that we need structural and functional proteins for the cell. We know that there's plenty of ions kicking about within the cell and outside the cell, which we need to keep an eye on. Lipids make up lots of the cell with all the different kind of membranes that go on around the outside and also around each organelle. And there is glucose present in the cells.
So just to summarize, the thing we was talking about today are all of the individual organelles, not all of them, just the main ones inside of a cell. And when we talk more, and go through the series, talk more about each individual one, what they actually do inside the cell, then you'll understand a little bit more. But I just wanted to outline what kind of organelles are inside a cell, what the cell was made up of. Human body cells can be in all sorts of different types, forms, shapes, size, and have different functions. But most eukaryotic cells are made up of water. They have functional and structural proteins, which are very important. That's why you need plenty of quality amino acids, quality proteins in your nutrition. It helps every single cell in your body. They also have lipids, fats, they have electrolytes, ions. So you need to make sure you're on top of your electrolytes, especially if you're an athlete. It helps the cell. And we'll talk more about that when we're on about the transferring of the sodium and potassium in and out of the cell via sodium pumps. We'll talk about that and how that process happens. But it's important you get those electrolytes in your nutrition. and especially more when you're an athlete, to keep the cells happy and to keep the process is of the cell working as they should. Also, there are lipids in there, which are fats, all different kinds of fats. I'll break it down when we talk about the phospholipid bilayer a little bit more. And the triglycerides, which also help with energy when we talk about the mitochondria. I'll talk about that. Yes, there is also carbohydrates inside of the cell, although it's a very small amount. I put up to 5%. There's more, tends to be more glucose carbohydrates in the liver cells, some in the muscle cells, and then less as you go down different kinds of cells. But there is glucose in there. The cell does function with glucose. So at the moment, you might be thinking, well, okay, I need carbohydrates in my nutrition, then every single cell needs carbohydrates. But as we go, again, I'll talk about how you don't actually have to consume carbohydrates to get carbohydrates, especially the amount that you need to keep each cell happy. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.